turnover the game for either team.
It's been so cleanly and well played, and there's Caitlin Clark initiating a little push with...
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. We've got a lot to talk about because this one was frustrating from start to finish. The Indiana Fever's 5-game winning streak is officially over after falling 108-100 to the Minnesota Lynx. And while credit absolutely belongs to the Lynx for playing like the best team in the WNBA, there are also some serious questions that need to be asked about how this game was managed from the Indiana side. Coming into this matchup, everyone knew the challenge. Minnesota has been the standard all season. They are disciplined, they execute on both ends of the floor, and they have multiple players capable of taking over a game. If you make mistakes against them, they make you pay immediately. That's exactly what happened tonight. Let's start with Olivia Miles because she completely controlled the first half. From the opening tip, she looked comfortable, she attacked the paint whenever she wanted, she knocked down jumpers, she made the right reads out of the pick and roll, and Indiana simply couldn't find an answer. She finished the first half with 23 points, and honestly, it felt like every possession she was creating something positive for Minnesota. That's where my biggest frustration begins. Why did it take so long for Indiana to change its defensive approach? For nearly 2 full quarters, Olivia Miles was operating comfortably in ball screen situations. The Fever continued using the same coverage, even though it clearly wasn't working. She was getting downhill, finding open space, and either finishing herself or creating opportunities for her teammates. When a player is that hot, adjustments have to come much sooner. Eventually, Indiana started blitzing the ball screen and forcing the ball out of her hands. Guess what happened? Her production slowed down significantly during the second half. That adjustment actually worked. So the obvious question is this: if it worked later, why wasn't it done earlier? Those first half points ended up being the difference in the game. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark was dealing with something completely different. Every single possession, Minnesota made life difficult for her. They trapped her, blitzed her in pick-and-roll situations, forced the ball out of her hands, and made someone else beat them. That's been the blueprint against Caitlin Clark for a long time now because teams know how dangerous she is with the basketball. She still managed to finish with 19 points and 10 assists, recording another double-double despite facing constant defensive pressure. Think about that for a second. Even while seeing multiple defenders throughout the game, she still found ways to create offense for her teammates. She continued making the correct basketball play instead of forcing difficult shots. On the other side, Olivia Miles spent much of the first half getting one-on-one opportunities before Indiana finally adjusted. That's the contrast that stood out throughout the game. Now, give credit where it's due. Minnesota earned this victory. Courtney Williams was outstanding once again. Every time Indiana started making a push, Courtney Williams answered. Whether it was a pull-up jumper, getting into the paint, or creating for teammates, she consistently made winning plays. Then you have Napheesa Collier. She reminded everyone why she's one of the league's elite players. Even when she wasn't dominating statistically early, her impact could be felt everywhere. She defended multiple positions, controlled the glass, and delivered several huge baskets during the second half whenever Minnesota needed them most. That's what championship caliber teams do. Someone always steps up. For Indiana, Kelsey did everything she possibly could offensively. She erupted for 37 points and was aggressive from the opening quarter. She attacked the basket, knocked down perimeter shots, and gave the Fever exactly the kind of offensive production they needed to stay within striking distance. Without Kelsey Mitchell's scoring explosion, this game probably gets out of hand much earlier. But basketball isn't just about putting points on the scoreboard. Defense matters, execution matters, communication matters. And that's where Indiana struggled for much of the night. The pick-and-roll defense was inconsistent, rotations were late, closeouts weren't sharp enough. Minnesota repeatedly found quality looks because the Fever weren't connected defensively during critical stretches. Then there were the coaching decisions. One sequence that stood out involved Raven Johnson. This wasn't about criticizing the rookie, quite the opposite. If a player hasn't seen meaningful minutes over several games, throwing her into a high-pressure situation against an opponent that's already rolling is incredibly difficult. Olivia Miles was playing with tremendous confidence, asking Raven Johnson to immediately slow that down after sitting for multiple games was a massive challenge. Young players develop through consistency. They need defined roles and opportunities to build confidence. Tossing someone into one of the toughest situations imaginable doesn't always put them in the best position to succeed. Another storyline was Lexi Hull. Her minutes were surprisingly limited. She checked out during the opening quarter and didn't return for a long stretch, finishing with only 14 minutes played. Naturally, fans are wondering what's happening there. Lexi Hull has been an important contributor throughout the season because of her hustle, perimeter defense, and ability to make winning plays that don't always appear in the box score. When someone like that sees limited minutes during a game where defensive energy is desperately needed, questions are going to follow. Again, that's part of what made this loss so frustrating. It wasn't simply that Minnesota played better. Everyone expected the Lynx to present an enormous challenge because they're arguably the best team in the league. The disappointment comes from feeling like Indiana waited too long to react. Once the Fever finally started trapping Olivia Miles and making other players initiate the offense, the momentum shifted. The comebacks started building. The energy inside the arena changed. Indiana began to cutting into the deficit possession by possession. Unfortunately, by that point, the damage from the first half had already been done. Instead of trying to erase a massive hole, the Fever were forced to spend the rest of the night chasing the game against one of the most disciplined teams in basketball. And against a team as talented as the Minnesota Lynx, digging yourself into that kind of early deficit is usually a recipe for trouble. The Fever showed heart. They never stopped competing. They kept battling, and they gave themselves a chance heading into the final minutes. But the biggest moments of the game, and the possessions that ultimately decided the outcome, were still to come. As the fourth quarter began, it finally looked like the Indiana Fever had found some momentum. The defensive intensity picked up, the ball movement improved, and for a moment, it felt like they might complete an impressive comeback against the best team in the league. They had weathered the storm after Olivia Miles' explosive first half, and suddenly, the game was within reach. That's what makes this loss so frustrating. The Fever did enough to put themselves back in position to win, but in the biggest moments, they simply couldn't finish possessions, execute offensively, or come up with the defensive stops they desperately needed. Let's talk about the sequence that changed everything. The score was 100-98 in favor of Minnesota. Caitlin Clark brought the ball up the floor knowing this possession could completely change the game. Indiana had an opportunity to tie it or even take the lead. Minnesota did exactly what they've done against Clark all night. They blitzed the ball screen and forced the ball out of her hands. Clark made the correct basketball play. She found Aliyah Boston standing open near the top of the key. Instead of taking the open shot or making a quick decision, the possession broke down and Boston was called for traveling. That turnover immediately shifted the momentum. On the very next trip down the floor, Kayla McBride attacked the lane and finished at the rim, extending Minnesota's lead. In a game decided by execution, those back-to-back possessions were enormous. From there, Indiana was chasing again. Caitlin Clark had a couple of clean looks from three-point range that just wouldn't fall. Kelsey Mitchell also had an open opportunity from deep that rimmed out. Those are shots both players are capable of making, but sometimes they simply don't go in. That's basketball. Still, the Fever had opportunities, and that's why this game will probably sting for a while. Against the best team in the league, you don't get many chances to steal a win. When those moments arrive, every possession matters. Another issue throughout the night was finishing defensive possessions. Minnesota consistently created second chance opportunities because they were more physical on the glass. The Lynx finished with 11 offensive rebounds, while Indiana managed only 5 of their own. Those extra possessions add up. Every offensive rebound extends a possession, creates additional scoring opportunities, and puts even more pressure on the defense. Against a disciplined team like Minnesota, giving away extra chances is incredibly costly. Defensively, Indiana was much better after halftime. Once they started aggressively trapping Olivia Miles in pick-and-roll situations, her rhythm changed considerably. The ball came out of her hands much faster, and Minnesota had to rely more heavily on its supporting cast to create offense. That's exactly the kind of adjustment many fans were hoping to see earlier. It doesn't guarantee a victory, but it certainly changed the flow of the game. Credit also belongs to Courtney Williams. She was outstanding from start to finish, scoring 27 points while consistently making smart decisions with the basketball. Whenever Indiana threatened to close the gap, Williams seemed to have an answer. Then there was Napheesa Collier. Even when she wasn't scoring in bunches, her presence affected every aspect of the game. She controlled rebounds, defended multiple positions, and made timely plays that don't always receive the attention they deserve. Championship teams need players who impact winning in every phase of the game, and Collier continues to prove why she's among the league's elite. Kayla McBride also delivered when Minnesota needed her most, knocking down important baskets and attacking the defense with confidence. On the Indiana side, Kelsey Mitchell deserves tremendous credit. Her 37-point performance kept the Fever alive all night. She attacked relentlessly, made difficult shots, and never backed away from the moment. Without her offensive explosion, Indiana likely isn't within striking distance during the fourth quarter. Caitlin Clark's stat line, 19 points and 10 assists, doesn't tell the entire story either. Minnesota devoted tremendous defensive attention to her throughout the game. She faced traps, blitzes, and multiple defenders whenever she came off a screen. Yet she still created quality looks for teammates and finished with another double-double. That's the kind of pressure star players face every night. Could Clark have been more aggressive in certain stretches? Perhaps. Her mid-range jumper looked comfortable, and there were moments where she found success attacking that area of the floor. But Minnesota's defensive game plan was clearly designed to force anyone other than Clark to become the primary scorer. For much of the night, it worked. One player who continues to impress is Mikayla Timpson. Every minute she was on the floor, she competed with tremendous energy. She battled against Napheesa Collier, finished efficiently around the basket, and brought effort on both ends. Young players who consistently play with that kind of intensity earn more opportunities, and Timpson continues to show encouraging signs. Looking at the bigger picture, this loss shouldn't erase what Indiana has accomplished recently. The 5-game winning streak showed how much this team has grown. They've become more competitive, they've learned how to close out games against quality opponents, and they've built confidence heading toward the most important part of the season. Tonight, however, they ran into a Minnesota Lynx team that reminded everyone why it's sitting at the top of the league. Minnesota plays with discipline. They execute their offensive system. They defend at a high level. They have multiple stars capable of taking over games. Most importantly, they rarely beat themselves. That's what makes them such a difficult matchup in a playoff series. Now, Indiana has plenty to review after this game. Defensive adjustments, rebounding, late-game execution, and rotation decisions will all be talking points over the coming days. Those are areas that have to improve if the Fever want to challenge the league's elite consistently. At the same time, one loss doesn't define a season. The Fever showed resilience by fighting back after falling behind early. They didn't quit, they continued competing until the final buzzer, and they proved they can battle with one of the WNBA's best teams. Now the challenge becomes learning from this performance and responding in the next game. That's what good teams do. They take the lessons from difficult losses, make the necessary adjustments, and come back stronger. The Minnesota Lynx earned this one, 108-100, snapping Indiana's 5-game winning streak. It was a game filled with momentum swings, standout performances, and a few crucial possessions that ultimately decided the outcome. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did the Fever wait too long to adjust defensively? What was the biggest turning point in the game? And what changes do you think Indiana needs to make before its next matchup? If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with other basketball fans. I'll see you in the next one.